Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So today we'll begin with the first of two sessions on the Ratana Sutta. So this is another one of the very famous and well-loved discourses, which also is commonly used as a blessing chant, a paritta. So I'll put a link to it in the chat window so you can follow along if you like. So we can start by paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So as mentioned, we'll be going through the first half or so of the Ratana Sutta. So the Ratana Sutta, its name is jewel or gem. So Ratana means a jewel or a gem, or just more generally speaking, anything that's precious, valuable, worth treasuring. And the Ratana Sutta is, and it's always throughout Buddhist history, it's always been a very popular verse to recite as a verse of blessing and protection. But it's been especially popular the last 2 years. And this is because traditionally, the Ratana Sutta is chanted in times of disease. So when there's any kind of pandemic, any kind of outbreak of disease or plague, then it's very common to recite the Ratana Sutta. And that's also commonly recited for people who are currently sick. So whether it's one person or millions of people, the Ratana Sutta is often used in time of illness. But it's also generic enough that it can be used on pretty much any occasion. So some paritta chants have a specific usage, and others are, actually most of them are more generic and can be used on any occasion. So the Ratana Sutta is an example of that. Although it does have an association with being recited in times of disease, the Ratana Sutta also is a generic paritta that can be used for any occasion on which blessing or protection chants are wished for. So I'll go ahead and start going through the discourse. So we'll be aiming to get through about half of it today. And once I've gone through the first half or so, then I'll take any questions that you have. So please feel free to type in questions at any time and I'll answer them at the end. So the discourse begins with calling upon all the beings who are present. So it starts off with saying, so whatever beings are gathered here, whether on the earth or in the sky, may all these beings be happy and may they carefully listen to this speech. So this is saying everyone. So whether they're terrestrial beings, so beings like humans and animals and insects and so on, or celestial beings. So also including all the devas that might be in the area. And this is a common thing which is often done at the start of paritta chanting, or even at the start of any Dhamma talk, is to invite all of the devas to come and listen as well. So sending out the invites for the local devas to come and listen to the Dhamma. So it continues saying, pay attention, have loving kindness for the humans. Day and night they bring offerings, therefore guard them diligently. So this also is entreating the devas to protect people who practice the Dhamma, to look after people who care about the Dhamma. So those two verses are the introductory, so it's not yet the core of the Ratana Sutta. So verse 3 is what starts the actual content, the meat of the sutta. In Pāli, the first line here, and often when reciting the sutta, people will start it at verse 3. So when reciting it as a paritta, it's not uncommon to start with verse 3. So in Pali, it begins, Yan kinchi vitang irvahurangva. So yan kinchi vitang means anything that's precious, any kind of treasure or valuable thing. So irvahurangva means here or beyond. So that means either in this world or in any other world. And sagesuva means or in the heaven realms. So it's kind of saying like anything valuable in any imaginable location. So whether in this world or in another world, whether in the earthly domain or in the heavens, whether in this life or in future lives, any kind of imaginable treasure or precious thing. Nano samang ati tathagatena. There is nothing equal to the Tathagata. So this is just an opening statement of homage to the Buddha. It's saying that any imaginable treasure, any precious thing that you can imagine, no matter how precious, none of it is as good as a Buddha. So a Buddha is the most precious treasure in all of samsara. And the term here that's used, by the way, so ratanang panitang. So ratana means jewel. Panita, it's translated here as magnificent, which is a decent enough translation. But it's worth keeping in mind that the word panita, it most commonly means delicious. So it's commonly used as an adjective for food. So food that's really delicious. It's really delightful. So this also I find interesting. So he's talking about the excellence of the Buddha, but particularly referring to the deliciousness of having access to the Buddha, the wonderful, satisfying nourishment that comes through having access to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Then it says etena sachena suvati hotu. So by this truth may there be well-being. So this is a refrain that you'll see at the end of each section. So etena sachena suvati hotu. By the power, or by this truth may there be well-being. So when reciting this, when you come to that line, etena sachena suvati hotu, one should make an effort to bring up a mind of metta. So really genuinely wishing for the well-being of whoever you're chanting this discourse for. Then the next verse, so this is verse 4, says, Kayang viragang amatang panitang. So kayang means elimination. So elimination of one's defilements, elimination of one's delusion. Viraga means dispassion. So the absence of any kind of lust or passion or obsession in the mind. Amatang means, literally it means not dead, which here it's commonly used as a reference to nibbana. So the ultimate, the absolute, which cannot be defined in terms of birth and death. It can't be defined in terms of arising or ceasing. So saying amata, so it doesn't mean undead in the sense of zombies or ghosts or something, but rather it means not subject to death. It cannot be defined in terms of coming into being or ceasing to exist. It cannot be defined in terms of existence or non-existence at all, in fact. So these, and panitang, so panita again, which means excellent or magnificent or delicious. So these four adjectives are all talking about nibbana. They're talking about the absolute. So the attainment of complete awakening to absolute truth. And the next phrase, Yadajiga Sakyamuni Samahito. So this means what was attained by Sakyamuni in samadhi. So Sakyamuni, of course, is one of the names that we use for the Buddha. So Sakya was the name of his family, of his clan, and Muni means sage. So Muni, actually originally the literal meaning of it is solitary, but it came to mean silent, and also it came to mean a sage, a wise person. And the reason for this is because often people who were seeking wisdom would go and live a silent and solitary life in the wilderness. So the word muni then has these three meanings. So solitary, silent, and sage. In the suttas, it's most commonly used in the sense of sage, a wise person. So Sakyamuni, that's the sage from the Sakya clan. The word Sakya also has the meaning of capable, like someone who has a lot of capability. And it says, Natena dhammena samati kinchi. So there's no equal to that Dhamma. There's no equal to that that teaching, that phenomenon, this ultimate realization, which comes through the attainment of awakening. So this direct realization of nibbana. And again, it says, Edampi dhamme ratanang panitang. So this also is an excellent treasure of the Dhamma. Etena sachena suvati hotu. By this truth may there be well-being. Then verse 5. Yang Buddha seto paravani yi suching samadhi manantari kanya mahu. So this verse, there's a lot of debate about how to interpret this particular line. So the first phrase is quite straightforward. So Yang Buddha seto parivana yi suching. So Buddha seto. So Buddha seto is the excellent Buddha, the supreme Buddha. So seta means the best or the supreme. So Buddha seto means the excellent Buddha, the supreme Buddha. Parivannayi means completely glorified or completely praised. And suching is pure. So what the excellent Buddha praised as pure. And then the place where there's some debate is around the phrase samadhi ma nantari kanya mahu. So this is a somewhat awkward compound word. So the first part is samadhi. So samadhi, again, is concentration or unification of mind. Anantarika means immediate, as in there's no delay. And anya means knowledge. So samadhi anantarika, anya. So it's these three words stuck together. And that's translated here as knowledge arising directly from samadhi. So the point here is that when one's mind is strongly concentrated and focused on the Dhamma, then wisdom arises immediately. So it's not like you practice and then somewhere many years down the line you realize like, oh, that was some amazing experience I had many years ago. But rather, the moment one makes a breakthrough to the truth, one immediately knows that's what it is. One immediately understands it. So when one has any kind of deep awakening experience, so whether it's stream entry, once return or non-return or arhat, one immediately knows that that's what's happened. There's no doubt in one's mind. So the knowledge arises immediately while one is in that state of concentration. And the next line, samadhi na tena samo navijjati. So there's no equal to that samadhi. So the state of samadhi in which one's mind is focused on cultivating insight, cultivating wisdom, to the point where there is this sudden breakthrough to the absolute, this sudden awakening to the true nature of reality. There's nothing equal to that samadhi. So no other state of concentration is as good as the concentration which produces wisdom. Actually, no other experience in samsara is equal to samadhi culminating in insight, culminating in wisdom. So it says, this also is the magnificent jewel called the Dhamma. By this truth may there be well-being. So again, the standard refrain at the end of each section. Then verse 6, Ye pugala atta satang pasata chatari etani yugani honti. So this is the 8 kinds of praiseworthy beings. So ye pugala means those people. Atta is 8. It's like the Atta Sikapara, the 8 precepts. Satang means existing or being, and pasatta means praiseworthy. So the 8 kinds of praiseworthy beings. Chatari etani yugani honti. So chatari 4, yugani pairs. So this is the 4 levels of realization. So stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arhat. And the 4 people who are on the path to attaining those. So the path to becoming a stream enterer, the path to becoming a once returner, non-returner, arhat. So for a total of 8 kinds of beings. And those who go by the suttas point to the fact that the suttas indicate that the person on the path to one of the 4 attainments can be on the path for quite some time. Those who rely on the commentaries, in the commentaries it says that the person on the path only exists for a fraction of a second, and then immediately attains the result. So someone on the path to stream entry, by the sutta understanding, someone might have cultivated the necessary conditions to become a stream enterer, but hasn't yet reached that attainment. And they might remain that way for minutes, hours, days, months, years, before attaining stream entry. According to the commentarial method, the moment one has the proper conditions for stream entry in one's mind, then stream entry will occur in the next instant, the next mind moment, so a fraction of a second later. So personally, as more of a Suttavadan, I go by the sutta explanation on this one, but that's a minor point and not really relevant. What's relevant is whether or not we're developing the qualities of mind that lead to stream entry in the first place. So the next line, Te dakaneya sugatasa savaka. So dakaneya means worthy of offerings, worthy of donations. Sugatasa savaka means the disciples of the Buddha, the disciples of the Sublime One. So this is saying that those who have attained any stage of awakening, even just those who are on the path to becoming stream enterers, such people are truly worthy of donations. They're truly worthy of support. They're worthy of being looked after and cared for. So this then it's one of the central components of Buddhist practice, is to really deeply care about people who are sincerely practicing the Buddhist path. So especially monastics, of course, people who have devoted their entire life to practicing the Buddha's teachings as fully and deeply as possible. But also supporting fellow lay practitioners who are trying to commit themselves deeply to the Dhamma. And also ultimately we should make some effort to care about everyone in our lives. As we've spoken about in previous sessions, this is an important part of the Dhamma. So we do put extra importance on supporting monastics and supporting dedicated practitioners, but we also should make an effort to be generous and compassionate towards everyone that we encounter. So te dakaneya sugatasa savaka ete sudinani mahapalani. So this says, what is given to such beings is of great fruit. In other words, the karmic effect of making an offering to someone who is awakened or on a path to awakening is much stronger than to any other kind of being. So this is laid out, for example, in the Dakkhana Vibhanga Sutta, where the Buddha gives a general understanding of how the karmic effects of generosity play out. And I wouldn't take these numbers too literally, but the Buddha says things like, giving a gift to an animal will come back to you 10 times. Giving a gift to an evil person, an evil human being, will come back to you 100 times. Giving a gift to an ordinary virtuous person will come back to you 1,000 times. And then he works his way up from there, up to people who are practicing the Buddhist path, to bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, giving to sanghas. And actually the highest is to give to the dual sangha, so to a combined sangha of both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis in one place, one monastery. It's actually the highest offering. The Buddha says that's even higher than giving something to a Buddha, is to make a donation to a dual sangha of both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. And of course, making offerings to awakened beings. This also is important. In terms of the potency of one's karma. But it is worth pointing out that the Buddha said that even higher than the merit of making offerings to a Buddha is making offerings to a dual gender sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. Next, verse 7 in Pali, this is Ye supayuta manasa dalhena. This means those whose minds are well directed and steady. So supayutta means well directed. So payutta means committed or focused. So supayutta means very well committed, well focused, well directed. And dalha means firm or steady or strong. So with a mind that is firm, steady, and strong, and focused well. Nikkamino, this next word, means that one has put down sensuality. So one is no longer interested in sensual pursuits. So Nikkamino Gautama Sasanamhi, so those in the instructions of the Buddha Gautama who have put down sensuality with a firm and steady mind that's well focused. The next line, Te patipata amatang vegaiha. So those who have reached the deathless and immersed themselves in it. So patipata means arrived at. Amata again means the deathless, the undying, which is nibbana. And vigaiha means having immersed oneself into, like when you jump into a pool of water. So this is talking about, again, someone who's attained full awakening. They fully immerse themselves in the soothing water of the deathless. They've fully immersed themselves in nibbana, in the absolute. Actually, we're already fully immersed in the absolute. We just don't realize it. We're lost in our own delusions. So we're still experiencing samsara. We don't recognize the pervasiveness of the nibbana dhatu. So this is what distinguishes an awakened being, is that they've recognized the pervasiveness of the nibbana dhatu. They've recognized that they're already immersed in the deathless. They're already immersed in nibbana. So then the next phrase, ladda muda nibbuting bunjamana. So freely enjoying the enlightenment they've acquired. So nibbuting here it's actually the past participle form of the word nibbana. So this is an example of one of the reasons to learn Pali, by the way, is that then you start to catch the relationship between words. So nibbuting, so nibbana is a present participle, and nibbuti is a past participle, but they're both from the same verb. So they have effectively the same meaning. But nibbuting is commonly used to refer to someone who has already attained awakening, and that they've already extinguished the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. So it says here, again, freely enjoying the enlightenment they've acquired. So one who's attained full awakening is in a state of permanent bliss, a state of permanent serene happiness. And it's a completely blameless and harmless form of happiness. So the next line here, so we're up to line verse 8. So yatenda kilo pataving satosiya. So just as a pillar firmly planted in the ground, chatubhivatehi asampakampiyo, cannot be shaken by the four winds. So here the Buddha is creating a metaphor. So if you imagine a pillar or a column that's been firmly rooted in the ground, so it has a very strong foundation, then no matter how strong the wind blows, that pillar, that column, it won't be shaken, it won't move. So the Buddha says, in the same way, tatupamang satpurasang vadami. The Buddha says, in the same way I speak of a good person, a true person. Yo arya sachani avechapasati, who has clearly seen the noble truths. So satpurisa, this is a word that turns up in many suttas. And its literal meaning is a good person or a true person. And sometimes it's used in a more general sense to mean a person who is committed to morality, committed to spiritual practice. So a good person in a more general sense. But it's normally used to refer to somebody who has transformed their character. And especially that's used to refer to people who have some stage of awakening, who are at least stream enterers. So people who can be therefore defined as irreversibly good people, who have a deep understanding of truth. So there's mundane good people, but mundane good people are subject to backsliding. They're subject to developing bad habits. Whereas an awakened being does not backslide. So they'll never lose the goodness that they've developed. And so, of course, the Buddha says one who clearly sees the Four Noble Truths. So this is a way of talking about a stream enterer. So prior to stream entry, we might have some understanding of the Four Noble Truths, but we don't fully understand them. But with stream entry, one gets that first glimpse of the absolute, that first glimpse of truth, that first clear sight of the undeniability of the Buddha's teachings. And this establishes a firm faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and a firm faith in the Four Noble Truths. So this also is something which the Buddha says is one of the really praiseworthy aspects of the Sangha, is that in the Sangha, if someone clearly sees the Four Noble Truths, then they cannot be shaken or disturbed by anything. So nothing can knock them off of the path at that point. Once one gets a glimpse of the absolute, then one can never be deflected from Buddhist practice. Then verse 9, and this will be the last verse for today. Verse 9, Ye arya sachani vibhavayanti. This is those for whom the noble truths become clear. Gambhira panyena sudesitani, which have been well taught by the one of deep wisdom, of profound wisdom. So Gambhira panya, this is referring to the Buddha, so the one of deep and profound wisdom. Kinchapi te honti busapamatta says, no matter how negligent they are, nate bhavang attang adiyanti. Attamang adiyanti. Yeah, so they will not take on an eighth existence. So again, this is talking about a stream enterer. So one of the characteristics of a stream enterer is that they are irreversibly on the path to full awakening. And they're incapable of backsliding. So they will only make forward progress. So their mind is not yet completely pure, or else they would be arhants, fully awakened. So since their mind is not yet completely pure, a stream enterer also does have some degree of negligence. They have a certain amount of carelessness or recklessness, a certain amount of defilement still remaining in the mind. But it's much weaker it's been greatly weakened by that first clear realization, that first clear vision of the Dhamma. So no matter how negligent they might be, their negligence is not strong enough to keep them caught in samsara for more than 7 lifetimes, which is why it says here they do not take on an 8th existence. So no matter how much suffering one might experience in those 7 lifetimes, there's a clear end to it. One is certain to attain awakening within a few lifetimes. And realistically, 7 lifetimes is not very many. We've lived countless billions of lives, more lives than we could ever be able to count. So 7 more is actually not so much. That's quite doable. And it might be less. So stream enterer is not, it's not exactly 7 lives, but it's a maximum of 7. It might be less than that. So that brings us up to verse 9. So at this point, I'll go ahead and take any questions that you might have. So we can start with 3 sadhus to respect these Dhamma verses. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I see there's lots of people checking in. Wonderful to see all of you. So hello to Charles Lee, Gita, Kumu, other Gita. So we have both Gita Jnana and Gita Brown. So hello to both Gitas. Hello to Annie, John, Amaranta, Patricia, Jayanta, Melissa, Siyong, Sopoan, Robin, Sud, Ing, Amit, Tongkam, Ashin Dhamma. Hello, Venerable. Always lovely to see other monastics joining in. Babati, Suchaya, Mig, Puong, Michael, Shireen, Maria, Ong Shipru, Jen, and Niranjan. Great, wonderful. Lots of people joining in. Good to see. So I see there's some questions. So Melissa says, Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Is this the same as the word you just said? I assume you're referring to Sakyamuni. So yeah, Sakyamuni in Pali is pronounced Shakyamuni in Sanskrit. But otherwise it's the same word. It's just pronounced slightly differently in Sanskrit. So yes, it's the same word. So Shakyamunaye, that would be one of the declensions of the word Shakyamuni. And I'm not going to go into a Pali grammar lesson at this time. But suffice to say, it's the same word, same name. Kumu says, the word panitang came to mind as in the famous stanza, etang santang etang panitang, yarirag sabasankara samato, etc. Is this meaning the same as in the Ratana Sutta? Yeah, it's the same word, and the meaning is basically the same. So that particular stanza you're referring to, I gave a Dhamma talk on it a few months ago. So this is one of my favorite sayings from the sutta. You know this one? Etang santang, etang panitang, yirirang sam. Bhante Nyanananda wrote a wonderful series of books on the subject called Nibbana, the Mind Stilled. I don't think we have it here, but if you get a chance. Anyway, so that's a series of verses about Nibbana. So those are really worth digging into when you get a chance. Again, Bhante Nyanananda's book called Nibbana, the Mind Stilled, goes into that in detail. And of course, if you read Sinhala, you can read the Sinhala versions of those texts, which are apparently a bit more in-depth than the English version. And Sud asks, based on the sutta, is it right to think that if the Eightfold Path is followed with fidelity, eventually they will get to stream entry and they are protected by devas along the way? Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so if one commits firmly to practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, then one will inevitably attain awakening. As long as one's commitment is firm and one really follows through with that, then awakening is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. It may not necessarily happen in this life, but it will eventually happen as long as one stays on the Eightfold Path. Yeah, and you will be protected by devas along the way. So there are plenty of devas who watch over Dhamma practitioners. So you don't need to worry about that. They've got your back. And Sud says, why does it say, based on this truth, may there be well-being? Does it mean truth itself has the power to control situations and give one a good result? That's one interpretation, but a more simple explanation is that by understanding the truth of the Dhamma, then one is able to practice in accordance with the Dhamma, and that brings about well-being as a result. So that's more the way that I understand it. So Bhavani asks, after Angulimala became an arhat, he sometimes didn't get alms, and also people threw stones at him. How could he go through this suffering? So Angulimala wasn't suffering. He was already an arhat. So even when people harassed him, he wasn't bothered. In fact, he had compassion for them. He had compassion for people who were mistreating an arhat because they were making really bad karma by doing so. So Angulimala wasn't suffering when people were mistreating him. He just, in fact, all he had was a mind of deep compassion for them. Nonetheless, he was still experiencing the residual vipaka of the karma that he had made before becoming an arhat. So before becoming an arhat, he had done terrible things. He had killed hundreds of people. Senseless murders of countless people. So he was experiencing the residual effects of those choices. So even after attaining awakening, your past karma is still producing results. The difference is that an awakened being cannot be disturbed or bothered by anything that happens to them. So that was the case with Angulimala. He was still getting the harmful consequences of his past choices. But because he was fully awakened, he wasn't bothered. And also because attaining awakening is such incredibly powerful good karma, that vastly diluted his bad karma from before awakening. So the karma of killing hundreds of people is really strong. So that usually would produce extremely strong harmful results. But because Angulimala had practiced the Dhamma and attained awakening, instead, all of that very strong bad karma from the past was greatly diluted and weakened. So it only manifested with things like people being stingy with alms food and throwing stones and yelling at him once in a while. So actually not too bad by comparison. Amaranta asks, practicing metta meditation before chanting can help to recite the sutta, so this can have an effect on us and for others. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, it's always a good idea to practice metta. But yeah, practicing metta before chanting the sutta, yeah, that might make it more powerful for you. I also find, for me, reciting suttas like this, so the Ratana Sutta, where it does have this constant reminder to bring up a thought of well-being for others, I find that helps me to produce a mind of metta. So I find that reciting the Ratana Sutta helps me to bring up a mind of metta. And that's the last question from online. Any questions from the residents? Anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I'd really appreciate, Bhante, if you could say a bit more about the word nibbana and like the various meanings, if you could tease those out for us.
That's actually a big topic. So the word nibbana, so the prefix ner means down, or out or away, or without. So that's pretty clear. But it's the second part, the part vana. This is where there's several different interpretations. So one meaning is blowing, like the wind blowing, which is why nibbana is sometimes translated as extinguishment. So it's blowing out. So the image that the Buddha is using is it's like our mind is on fire with greed, hatred, and delusion. So nibbana is when you blow out that fire. You're extinguishing the fire that's burning your mind. So that's one very straightforward way of understanding the word nibbana. Another way is the word vana means it means craving. In and of itself, it means craving. So nibbana then can simply mean the absence of craving, which also is one of the ways the Buddha defines the word in some suttas. So those are the two most straightforward definitions of the word nibbana. There's some others, but those are usually the ones you can go to. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And okay, I see another question here. So Annie says, the fourth verse about the highest samadhi has been translated in different ways. This is definitely a true statement. You will see it translated in many, many, many different ways. So it's because that compound word is, it's rare, it's obscure, and its exact meaning is not particularly clear. So you can come across pages and pages of scholarly debate about what that phrase means. So has been translated in different ways, such as concentration without interruption and concentration of unmediated knowing. Can you explain what these mean? It's quite dangerous to ask one translator to explain somebody else's translation, because honestly, I don't always know what's going through somebody else's mind when they produce a translation. Seriously, better to ask whoever produced that translation what they meant and why they chose to do it in that way. Of these two, concentration of unmediated knowing, that I can get on board with. That's actually a reasonable translation. The previous one, concentration without interruption, it feels incomplete because it's missing the word knowledge. So anya means knowledge or knowing. Concentration of uninterrupted knowing might be a reasonable translation. But it needs to have that word anya, so knowledge or knowing, that needs to be included. That's the last question. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
So I know you mentioned that, like in karma conditions, it's like more, you get more merit from offering to both individual sangha than the Buddha. Would you be able to elaborate on like why?
Yeah, so the sangha is the vessel or the vehicle of liberation. So a Buddha is just one person, and if one is making an offering to the Buddha, then there's a focus on one particular person. Whereas if one is supporting the sangha, then one is supporting the whole vehicle of liberation, which carries in it countless people and extends over millennia. So the Buddha passed away a very long time ago, but the sangha is still with us. And the reason why the sangha is still with us is because people have been supporting it for more than 2,500 years now. So that's one way of understanding it. Another thing also is it's depersonalizing things. So it's not about a particular person, but rather it's about supporting the sangha as a whole and without discrimination. This is another important element of giving is when supporting the sangha, one is not saying like, well, I'm going to support Bhante so-and-so because I really like him. But I'm not going to support that Bhante because I don't like him as much. Well, what's going on here? Like, that's just our own defilements getting in the way of our generosity. That's not good. But when you support the sangha as a whole, you're not making any kind of discrimination. you're recognizing that all the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis are worth supporting because all of them are representatives of the Sangha. And ultimately what we're doing is we're supporting the Sangha as a whole. So the Buddha there is also pointing out that although he is the highest of the Sangha, the chief of the Sangha, he's still a member of the Sangha. So if you're supporting the Buddha, you're only supporting one member of the Sangha. But if you support the whole Sangha, that's much better. And actually he says the highest is to support dual Sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis headed by the Buddha. But that option isn't available to us anymore. That hasn't been around. So second best is to support a dual Sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. That's still available to us. Okay? Yeah. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and end it this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.